Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my astrology podcast. Today, we are going to be discussing what it means if you have a stellium in your birth chart. So to do this, we're first going to define what a stellium is, then what does it mean for your life path if you have a stellium in your chart, and last, I'm actually going to do a walkthrough of all 12 zodiac signs and assess what a stellium could look like in all of them. So to get started, what is a stellium? A stellium describes when there are three or more planets in the same sign of the zodiac or the same house. Now, for today's episode, we're just going to focus on what a stellium looks like in a sign of the zodiac. The signs of the zodiac represent behaviors and expressions and styles of energy, while planets represent actions and events. So, when you have a lot of planets or actions, events happening in the same sign of the zodiac, it is going to suggest that this part of you, with all of this zodiac signs energy, is probably going to really benefit from having rest, from finding balance. And through this challenge of holding so much of one energy, ultimately achieving mastery over that wedge of the zodiac. And so, what I usually see with somebody who has a stellium is that this quality of whatever sign their stellium is in shows up very abundantly in their life in some aspect. And by showing up so abundantly, this person can almost overdo this sign, right? Like they can go to the nth degree with it. And what that creates is a period of burnout, usually, or exhaustion, or some sort of halt, that you hit where you say, I can't go any further with this. I've exhausted this energy. This energy is played out in so many ways in my life. What else is there? And that is going to create a need for the stellium to find balance. And we're going to talk throughout this video about how we find balance through the opposite sign. But for now, just keep that in mind. There's so much energy going on. It burns out. It now needs balance. But through finding that balance and through going through whatever exhaustion or burnout period that sign brings us, we actually return to that sign with more mastery and perspective. So really, if you have a stellium in a particular sign, it allows you to fully master that energy. So now we're going to go through all 12 signs and we're going to talk about what the stellium looks like in each of these signs. How does it manifest? What are its tendencies? And what are the lessons you can take away if you have a stellium in one of the 12 signs? Okay. So beginning with Aries. Aries is actually a stellium we currently have in the skies. So what I'm about to describe might apply to your natal chart, but it also applies to us collectively at this very moment. So an Aries stellium, we'll just speak in terms of a nativity or a person's birth chart, is going to describe somebody who comes in with a lot of passion, right? A lot of intensity, a lot of drive, a lot to give, right? And they're very determined and motivated, likely as well. How this person can know that they're reaching that point of exhaustion or burnout is when they're starting to lose motivation, right? Aries is a cardinal energy. So when it loses the motivation to start something, you know that it needs balance because this is Aries, organic state. It's just a start. And it's when Aries slowly stops wanting to start things, or it starts things but doesn't finish them. And it just becomes sort of a loss of motivation in general that the Aries stellium needs to seek balance and transformation. So the way an Aries stellium can gain this transformation is by going to the opposite sign of Libra, okay? Libra is a sign that's about community and sharing ideas and being in communication with others, and also letting others speak and learning from other parts of the group. So an Aries stellium might really learn throughout their life how to socialize, how to be in community, how to share ideas. And thus they bring a transformation, right, into their own lives, which allows them to be bold and start projects and go after what they want, all while knowing how to collaborate and communicate and listen to the people they involve in their endeavors. Okay, moving on to a Taurus stellium. So this is having 3 or more planets in the sign of Taurus. These people are going to start out as those who naturally seek a lot of comfort, right? They're more focused on practical matters. They're interested really in their daily survival and just keeping things cool, calm, and collected, right? Taurus is a fixed earth sign, so it's really all about keeping things stable and grounded and working as they've worked and worked for them in the past, okay? What often happens when the Taurus stellium reaches that exhaustion point is this can manifest in inertia. This can manifest in doing the same thing over and over again, right? Kind of expecting a different result and just hitting up against that wall of like, why are things not changing? Or why do I feel so fatigued? Or why do things feel so boring or kind of stuck, right? Another way this can manifest for the Taurus stellium that I have seen is in addictions and illnesses. So if you think about that quality of Taurus that wants comfort, that wants reliability, that wants stability, this lends itself to a person who might be unwilling to change in some areas, right? And so this in a way could lead to poor eating habits or, addiction habits or whatever have you just to maintain that comfort. And so often the Taurus stellium is going to be faced with the lesson of balance that comes from its opposite sign of Scorpio. Scorpio is about going through the cycles of death and rebirth. Something in the Taurus stellium's life is going to have to die or be given or fade away in terms of comfort so that they can live in the darkness, so that they can live in the discomfort for a while. Eventually comfort will come back to find them. But this is really a huge lesson of the Taurus stellium, is getting out of the comfort zone, being okay with the cycles of life. And if a Taurus stellium can do this, then the Taurus stellium really knows how to work with cycles, right? They really know how to work with the cycles of life and death and rebirth. And they, in their daily lives, then can integrate, okay, some things have to go, some things are uncomfortable, but through that discomfort, I can learn how to create peace and solitude in myself and in my environment. Okay, so if you were born with a Gemini stellium, then you would be coming in with a lot of mental power, right? A lot of mental activity. You were probably very social as a kid, or even maybe the class clown, right? Funny. Another possibility with the Gemini stellium that I have seen is people who get very mentally overwhelmed. These people could also struggle with learning disabilities and just kind of feeling a couple steps behind everybody else because their minds are so busy processing all the time, right? And so one way we can see that the Gemini stellium is reaching that exhaustion point where transformation needs to happen is that their mind is causing them issues, right? So this could be overthinking. This could be mental health issues. This could be learning challenges, right? To a extreme degree. And this causes the Gemini stellium person to seek the balance of the opposite sign of Sagittarius, which is about the bigger picture, which is about intuition, which is about finding confidence and finding a sense of what we think about the world and just being comfortable as the storytellers and the narrators of kind of our greater life experience. In other words, if somebody starts with a Gemini stellium as being very attached to learning everything the right way and finding the correct data points and making sure that every little piece of information is acknowledged and integrated, that could cause them stumbling blocks. And Sagittarius helps them to see sometimes it's not about the micro, it's about the macro. It's about looking at things through this bigger picture lens. And that can really give the Gemini stellium some confidence, right? Like, I don't need to know it all today, but I know enough that I can speak with wisdom and clarity and confidence. So I say that the transformation of the Gemini stellium is really that they become a more empowered truth teller. And part of that truth is not just externally what you're absorbing, but it's internally what you feel and sense. And really, that's your intuition. So letting your intuition speak more for a Gemini stellium. Okay, if you were born with a Cancer stellium, you're going to come in with strong attachments and needs, right? So this is needing to feel at home. This is needing to feel safe. This is needing to feel cared for, and often being a very good caretaker of others. The Cancer stellium, though, might hit a point, this point of exhaustion in the stellium journey, where there's just a lot of fear, right? There's a lot of fear of leaving the comfort zone, of not having your needs met, perhaps of learning to adult and leave the home and meet your own needs. This can be very intimidating to, a Cancer stellium. That's somebody who really, really values nostalgia and the past and memories and family, chosen or family of origin, right? They're close people they want around. And so when this starts creating issues, right, agoraphobia would be an extreme example, right? Not being able to leave the house, just being so afraid of the outside world. These people need to learn the balance of the Capricorn archetype. The Capricorn archetype brings a healthy sense of repression, right? A healthy sense of repressing the fears and the needs that we have constantly and learning to sort of survive without them, developing a more stoic attitude on life where it's like, I might not get everything I need today. I might not feel secure right now, but I'm doing it for the long term and I'm doing it so that my future self will thank me. And the transformation that can then occur here is somebody can learn to play both roles of mother and father. More broadly on the Cancer and Capricorn spectrum, I also see gender issues as well. So there can be some issues around, kind of the cultural stereotypes, right, that we give to men and women, and maybe being overly identified with what the woman's supposed to do, what the man's supposed to do. And so the Cancer stellium or the Capricorn stellium is kind of moving past some of these limited, restricted ideas of men and women and learning to play both roles, which is really cool. Or, no roles at all because these roles are made up. But you know what I'm trying to say. Transcending those boundaries of what's for men and what's for women. Because we all, as Carl Jung said, have the anima and the animus. We have the masculine instinct and the feminine instinct. So the Cancer stellium is learning to balance both. Okay, so moving on to Leo stellium. This is somebody with 3 or more planets in the sign of Leo. So when you were born, likely you had a big personality, right? Or you just commanded a lot of attention. People were very interested in your charisma and your performing abilities and your artistic abilities and your skills and talents. You likely got used to this attention, right? And you were like, oh my God, it's about me. It's all about me. And you may have just been conditioned to live with this attention, to live with this sense of external validation. Well, when a Leo stellium is getting exhausted and when they are needing to transform, is when the Leo stellium is no longer able to validate themselves. So they become too reliant on perhaps what other people think, how other people are applauding them or recognizing them. And this makes it very hard for the Leo stellium to get motivated and to chase its spirit. Because one of the problems of being fixed fire, that is the triplicity and quadruplicity of Leo, is that fixed fire needs wood and needs rocks and needs grass to feed it. It needs external input in order to build that fire up, to keep that fixed campfire going, right? And Leo has to, in many ways, learn through this life journey, especially a stellium, how to maintain the fire when nobody's contributing or when nobody's looking, right? In other words, how to validate themselves. And so Leo stellium can find a balance when they begin surrounding themselves with people who are more just everyday people, with people who are all just about living their lives and also reinventing the wheel. This archetype is represented by Aquarius, which is Leo's opposite. So, a Leo, by going out and meeting people who are different and who don't really fit in, or who also maybe don't really feel seen or appreciated in the ways that they would like to be, They all kind of teach each other in these communities how to be themselves and shine unapologetically as themselves. And they also learn how to reinvent the wheel, how to do things differently so that they can, attract a fair amount of attention and still meet that need of being seen, but they're going to do it in a way that's different. They're going to do it in a way that involves community. They're going to do it in a way that hasn't been seen before. And that's the point of the Aquarius opposite, is to teach Leo how to embrace its very unique light and share it with other people so they can be liberated to also be themselves. So really the transformation a Leo stellium is on is to be more of their innovative, authentic selves that shine with or without the crowd, but internally carries a sense of, I'm great, I'm awesome, I'm doing things that feel exciting and different. So Leo stellium, hope that speaks to you a bit. And we're hitting that halfway point in the zodiac, which means Ethan needs his latte. And we're brought to Virgo. So if you have a Virgo stellium in your chart, you're likely going to start out as a person who is rather picky, right? Rather selective, a bit of a control freak. We all, know that Virgo stereotype. Virgo stelliums can burn out from anxiety. They can burn out from trying to control too much. They can also grow a bit bored and fatigued in the routines that they set out for themselves. And so Virgo stelliums can really benefit from spending time in the opposite sign of Pisces, which gives them that balance. This means taking more time to daydream, taking more time out of your day to I was going to say to wander, but to wander and wonder. Wonder what's out there, wonder what's beyond our limitations. Sometimes with a Virgo stellium, because Virgo also relates to health, these people might actually have health issues. Um, and this can be psychic or it can be physical. And often these issues will almost be pointing them towards this Piscean realm, where instead of being so caught in the day-to-day motions of managing life, they are then through the hospital bed or, through whatever place of solitude they find themselves in, they are able to kind of see the bigger picture of things and relax into a sense of faith in the universe. And so Virgo stelliums actually have this beautiful ability to marry all their natural skills and talents for managing physical life, of being on top of their routines and on being very skillful and reliable. They have the ability to marry that with a spiritual perspective and thus teach us that life on this earth is both spiritual and physical, and that we need to take care of our physical health just as much as our spiritual health. Both are conducive to producing, everyday routines and wellness. That's another point of the Virgo stellium that's really important to pay attention to is wellness, right? We can't experience wellness if we're always in control, but we also can't experience wellness if we totally surrender all control, right? If we just do nothing. And that's an issue that we'll get to at the Pisces stellium at the very end of this video. But Virgo is really teaching us how to marry both. Where do we have control, and where can we just completely let go and let the universe take the lead? Many coffee breaks coming up in the second half of the video, guys. Okay, so Libra. Libra stelliums are going to be very charming, very social, very pleasing people to be around. Almost like the kind of people that you just look around and you're like, is this person real? Like they're so good. They're so wonderful, right? And Libra stelliums really can be. They really can bring this energy of harmony and also real interest in other people's issues, right? And in being very committed to listening and helping other people. But deep down inside, a Libra stellium may carry this feeling of being an outcast, of not truly belonging. Because Libra is the scales, right? It's always measuring itself against other people. It's always putting itself last. It's always assuming, that it's, heavy or too much, and so it needs to balance itself out with the people it's around, right? And so what this creates for the Libra Stellium is likely some periods of introspection, some periods away from the group, friendship losses, right? Kind of that feeling of exile from a community because one just does not feel like they can totally be themselves in some of these environments. What that is pushing them towards to balance is the opposite archetype of Aries, which is about being bold, which is about being seen, and which is about taking up space. And so Libra Stellium needs to learn these lessons about how to make other people uncomfortable, but how to make other people uncomfortable, not for the sake of just messing with them or making them feel down or making them feel bad or whatever, being controversial for the sake of being controversial, right? No, like the Libra Stellium needs to embrace the boldness of Aries so that they can deliver justice on account of themselves and on account of the people that they're dealing with interpersonally. You know, what I find so interesting about the Libra archetype is it is the exaltation of Saturn. And Saturn is all about people suffering, and it's all about where work needs to be done, and it's all about darkness. And Libra being the scales, being about law, being about justice, right? If a lawyer does not know how to fight back, does not know how to be charismatic, and does not know how to like really go all in for their client, right? I mean, they can't have a law career. And so in the Libra archetype, they need to develop that boldness. They need to develop that ability to speak out and tell uncomfortable truths. Um, and they also, in my opinion, need to learn to accept other truths that make them uncomfortable. Because sometimes the Libra stellium might be a little bit like, oh, well, the group is saying that this is what's correct. And so if you tell me this other thing's correct, that has potential to make me feel wrong, to make me feel unstable. And so part of developing that Aries opposite is developing your independence, is developing your own perspective so that you can respond in group matters to what is right and what is wrong according to your own moral compass, not just what the group says, not just what society says. So there's a lot in there. But what I'm going to leave you with, Libra Stellium, is just becoming a more audacious truth teller that tells uncomfortable truths. Okay. All right. A Scorpio Stellium. So if you have Scorpio Stellium, right, you're going to come in with some intensity. It's not the kind of Aries intensity that we see on the surface. It's inner intensity. It's inner feeling. It's sensitivity to everything happening around you. Um, these people thus might find themselves in situations of chaos that they can't control. And so they're going to develop this tendency of survival in the darkest and the hardest of situations. Eventually, this is going to become about their own psychological survival. So this is really an internal game that they are learning to play of how to keep themselves safe, of how to avoid hard stuff. And this can, of course, lead to a lot of issues, right? It can lead to, in the most extreme cases, um, addiction. It can lead to just any form of self-destruction, also extreme pressure that one puts on oneself. So because of the strong nature of inner feeling that they have, and sensitivity and doggedness about survival in tough situations, they need to learn to honestly relax and enjoy the peaceful moments and the quiet moments. This is the Taurus opposite. Okay, the Taurus opposite is about peace, it's about harmony, it's about grace, it's about, the places where the grass grows green and tall, where there's food, on a long table, just ready for all of us to feast. It's a waterfall, it's just everything that's peaceful and perfect about nature in Taurus, while Scorpio represents the decay and the death and the chaos of nature. So for Scorpio, they actually can't exist full time in that death, chaos, area of nature. They have to come up for air. They have to come up and be part of the land, which means being part of life, right? Not just being in this mode of survival or this mode of, what do I have to do to get through this hard thing? But actually being part of life, being part of the beauty, enjoying the quiet moments, because this can also be an avoidance tactic that Scorpio has in relationships, is that it almost would rather manage something difficult or be in some sort of drama so that it doesn't have to face the beauty of right now, because the beauty of right now just might not feel safe. And obviously, this is not universal to every Scorpio stellium. There's many ways I could explain this archetype, but what we need to think about is how Scorpio stelliums are going to be more comfortable in the death, in the rebirth, and in the discomfort of life. And what they need to maybe lean more towards is the peace and the simplicity of nature when it's calm, of nature when it's spring, of nature when things are blooming. Not that nature isn't beautiful and perfect in, the fall time and the winter time. But if we stay there for too long, then we never get to feel the sun, right? We never get to smell the roses, and we never get to really enjoy life. So a big thing about these people is enjoying life and knowing, like Taurus, the cycles of nature and working and living with grace through the dark times and through the light times. So these people can really be excellent at helping other people identify these cycles in their life, work through their darkness, and see the springtime in the end, see the blooms, and be teachers and how we can radically appreciate and fully live in the sunlight and in the darkness, in all of it. Okay. So Sagittarius rising, or sorry, we're doing stelliums. Sagittarius stellium. You are likely going to show up on this earth a really fun, bubbly, enthusiastic person, right? People are going to want to be around you. You're going to carry this charisma, almost like you're just born a motivational speaker, and people want to listen to you. People want to hear from you. A place that you might get exhausted is that you might be very convicted in your philosophies, in your beliefs, in what you're sharing. And while this gives you a confidence, it can also draw people away from you. It can also make people think, gee, it's like they really think they know it all. And you probably do know a lot, but are you slowing down to listen to other people's experiences? Are you open to hearing other forms of truth? Or are you stuck perhaps in the loop of your own big, wonderful, charismatic, but sometimes ill-timed or not super open thoughts, right, that you're sharing? So one of the balance points for the Sagittarius stellium is to get outside the comfort zone of their own ideas, of their own philosophies and beliefs, is to expose themselves to other types of truth, to other types of data that disproves perhaps what they think to be true. And, this can be really challenging because, Jupiter, which is the planet that rules Sagittarius, is exalted in Cancer. And what I always think about that exaltation is beliefs carry extreme emotional content for us. Whatever we believe gives us a sense of security, right? And so within the Sagittarius archetype, there can actually be a lot of sensitivity around one's beliefs, around what one constitutes to be true. And so when those beliefs are disproved or challenged, it can create emotional challenges, right? But it can also open us to new ways of seeing, new ways of connecting, new ways of relating. And the Sagittarius, much like, the next two signs we're going to talk about, can sometimes struggle with alienation if it's not open, if it's not engaging in conversations, if it's not, being part of other people's worlds. So this could be a challenge, but it's ultimately going to make you a more well-rounded intellectual, thinker, speaker, creator, having experiences that expose you to different ways of doing, seeing, knowing, being. I call this the journey towards becoming the eclectic philosopher. So it's where you are collecting more than just one experience, but multiple in order to speak to that larger picture of reality you're so driven to understand. Okay, so we're in our last three signs of the zodiac. And we're going to start with Capricorn. So if you have a Capricorn stellium, you may come in a bit more reserved, a bit more on the shy side, a little bit more cautious, a little bit more conservative, perhaps with, putting yourself out there or socializing. When this gets to be old, when a Capricorn stellium is reaching that stellium exhaustion point, they're likely going to feel depressed. They're likely going to feel cut off and detached. Um, and this points them in the direction of the opposite archetype of Cancer, which is about paying attention to how they feel about the lives they're living. Capricorn to me is one of my favorite archetypes currently to study because when I learned the myth of Pan, which is the goat in Greek mythology, the goat man that Capricorn's based off of, a lot started clicking for me. So Pan was half man, half goat, and he lived out in the countryside. And he loved music and sex and partying, and he was just this force of nature, this very wild, creative force. But when humans would cross through the countryside and they would see Pan, they would actually get panicked. They would get fearful. And I think that this is why Pan and the Capricorn archetype hides or oppresses themselves a bit, is because there's a fear, perhaps there, that they're gonna be too much. That if they let out the wild and the crazy and the zany side of themselves, it could freak people out and it could outcast them from society. So I think within the Capricorn archetype, why it can be so socially conscious and focused on, systems and traditions and what works is because there's a deep fear within that they don't work, that they're dysfunctional, that there's something wrong with them. And so when they can turn within and recognize that force that's in them, that creative, that sexual, that musical force that's within them, it allows them to do the systems of life with gusto, with energy, with potency, without that sense of I got to repress or I got to depress or I got to kind of shrink away parts of myself that aren't worthy or acceptable. So through the Capricorn stellium, you are learning to enrich your outer world with your inner world, to create a blend of the two, to not give up in your professional endeavors, but to authenticate them with the light and the spirit that is in your heart and flowing through you, wanting to flow through you all the time. And like the Cancer stellium, Capricorn stelliums can run into gender issues. So in the case of a Capricorn stellium, archetypically, it might be more that they gravitate towards the masculine, right? So they might gravitate more towards, whatever we assign masculinity, work, war, being strong, being a man, whatever that is. And there could just be some resistance to letting in those more feminine characteristics represented by Cancer, but that when they learn to become both, when they learn to balance Cancer, Capricorn, masculinity, and femininity, they learn to really hold space for both their anima and their animus. So the transformation looking to occur here is where you become father and mother simultaneously. Okay, if you have an Aquarius stellium, well, you are going to come in quite feeling like the outsider, right? You're probably going to be a person who has a lot of strong ideas. You could be very strongly willed towards realizing those ideas. You might feel a bit cut off from other people. And where this becomes exhausting for an Aquarius stellium, like really exhausting, really challenging, is where they almost feel shut off from society or they feel unseen. They feel alienated. They feel like they're not connecting. Because deep down, what an Aquarius stellium would want is all of us to connect, is all of us to be one and harmonious. Like that's what's so contradictory about Aquarius is that they just don't like the way human connection is facilitated, but all they want is human connection. They want to do it in their own way. They want to do it in a way that is innovative and that is different. So this is why they feel challenged to feel seen, is because our systems, they're right, don't always help us feel seen, don't always help us feel included, don't make space for differences. And so the Aquarius Stellium has to learn to be okay with sharing their weirdness and their authenticity with the world. This is the Leo opposite, right? The Leo opposite represents shining and sharing and being one's authentic light. And Aquarius isn't necessarily looking to be the star, but they are looking to be a star in a constellation. They're looking to be a force of inspiration through the vehicle of other people, right? And so when they can learn to be a bit of a leader in this way, sharing their ideas, making their art, doing things that are a bit outside the norm, they're going to attract and bring in people who very similarly want the same thing. Maybe they even have an audience that really admires what they're doing. And this allows them to be innovators of authenticity. So similar to Leo, which is looking to really innovate and expand its authentic self, Aquarius is concerned with all of our authentic selves, but Aquarius stelliums have to learn that it begins with them. It begins with them stepping into the light and sharing that unapologetically. All right, we have arrived at our final stellium, which is a Pisces stellium. If you were born with a Pisces stellium, you are going to be a very imaginative, very dreamy sort of child, somebody who is just um, very open to the world and perhaps also a little bit empty. It's funny is that Pisces is a mutable water sign, and mutability is all about going with the flow, and water is just about, our feelings and other people's feelings. So these are also very empathic people who take in a lot on emotional levels and spiritual and psychic levels. But they're also kind of like driftwood in the ocean sometimes, if you have a stellium in Pisces, like just kind of, albeit lost at points, right? And so one of the places the Pisces stellium can get really exhausted is when they feel a lack of direction, a lack of clarity, a lack of grounding, right? When everything just feels like it's pushing them and moving them and they can't set boundaries or they can't set a schedule or they can't you know uh sign an agreement because it all just feels too much. Whatever it is, it's this lack of direction and clarity that can drive them a little bit crazy, right? And so the balance point for a Pisces stellium is Virgo. Virgo is about the details. It's about the practical. It's about the everyday, real world work we have to do. And it sort of reminds me of the artist who never wants to work, a Pisces stellium. But then when they actually get a job and they start working, they start to learn, oh, that's like the balance I needed to give myself space to daydream, right? Pisces like need space to daydream. And so when they pursue work and practical matters that are totally opposite of sort of the things they're imagining or intuiting, it actually gives them more space to imagine. It actually gives them more space to daydream and to wonder, right? So, a big challenge for these people, though, might be finding a balance between their practical, everyday routines and these more imaginal, these more abstract ideas that they carry. So similar to a Virgo stellium, these people are here to learn how to marry our sort of spiritual faculties with our physical faculties. While these people might come in stronger on the spiritual, psychic end, artistic, imaginative end, let's just call it right brain for short, they're learning to develop a bit of the left brain. And when they do develop the left brain, man, can these people I wrote down in my notes for today, they can become like the quantum scientist, where they are teaching us that actually the mind and consciousness are moving the universe more than the mechanical processes we've assumed. Like these people can teach us that within every atom, within every facet of our physical experience, there is something spiritual, there is something greater, there is some profound or divine energy moving through it. So the Pisces stellium does have this gift of being able to see kind of the meaning and the divinity and the connections between things, but it's learning to channel this in practical, functional ways that can serve the world. Okay. So everyone, that concludes our lesson in stelliums, what it means if you have a stellium. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a comment, leave my podcast a rating or review. It would mean a lot. It would really help the podcast. And if you're interested in booking a personal reading with me, go to https://ethan-paisley.com. And if you want to keep up on social media, e.b.paisley on Instagram and Ethan B. Paisley on TikTok. Thank you guys so much for listening today. I hope this video was helpful. If you have a stellium, did it resonate? Did it feel good in your body, what I said? Are there things you disagree with? Are there things you want to add in? Because I want to learn just as much as I want to share. So thanks, guys, for being here, and we'll talk very soon on the next episode.